G'day and welcome to the Pursuit of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Rosie Burrows, and I'm on a journey to find my freedom so that I can help you do exactly the same. Join me each week as I share the stories of everyday people who have found their own paths to freedom. I'm not going to focus on job titles and accolades because I don't care about that stuff, and neither should you. I want to uncover what truly makes you tick. Who are you when you step away from society's expectations and follow your heart? I still haven't figured it out yet. Have you? Either way, buckle up because it's going to be one hell of a ride. Welcome back to the Pursuit of Freedom podcast. Joining me today is Aeoliana Elliott. She has been very patient with me. This is the very first time I have shown up late to one of my recordings. It's so embarrassing, but that's life sometimes. The van is all over the place. The Starlink is all over the place. But here we are, and I'm actually really excited for this conversation. Aeoliana is a solopreneur. She's a mother. She's a wife, a full-time paralegal. So many things, and like all of us, she's more than just one label, and we're going to dive into that today. So Aeoliana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rosie. Now remember, you're not late. You arrived exactly when you were supposed to arrive.
Thank you. That feels a lot better.
We're never late. We are exactly where we are supposed to be when we are supposed to be there.
I appreciate that. So Aeoliana, I really like to start these episodes kind of going back in my guests' lives and unpacking who you were. What was life like for you as a little girl? Where did your journey start?
Oh my gosh, we're going way back.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I was born in Puerto Rico. I would live there with my parents, my brothers. I have two brothers until about 1985. And then we moved. My dad, we used to work for a company called Citibank, Citigroup, Citicorp. It's changed different names. If you have a credit card, you have a Citi card, same company. Used to work for that company. And in 85, they moved him from Puerto Rico to Florida. And so we moved to Florida in 85, and we have been here ever since. I got my bachelor's in criminology from the University of South Florida. I started working as a paralegal, legal assistant at the state attorney's office in Tampa. I met my husband in middle school. We started dating after college. We've been married for 19 years now. We hit 20 years in May.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have a 12-year-old son who lives and breathes and plays hockey. So that is the life. I work from home as a paralegal full time. And then our weekends are spent at the hockey rink. He's on two different teams.
Wow.
So our time is split with lots of practices, lots of, tournaments, games, things like that. So I am the old, like the t-shirts that say, I can't, my kid has, whatever or something. That's totally me.
That's you.
I can't, my kid has hockey. Or a game, a practice. We've got something. So yeah, that's me. That's me in a nutshell.
Wow. And isn't it cool that you've designed your life in such a way that you can attend and be there for your son's hockey games, right? Not everybody can do that. Yeah. You work full-time as a paralegal. You got all these other things going on, and yet you're present as a wife and a mother, and I just think that's wonderful. And I'd like to know how have you got it to this point? I know a lot of people struggle with that.
I think balance is something that everyone strives for, but it's something that it's a constant journey. It's not ever anything that you fully achieve, because just when you think you have balance in one aspect of your life, something else rolls along and it throws everything.
Tell me about it.
So you have to be adaptable. Yeah, you have to be adaptable. Like we were talking before we started last week, I had a couple of episodes set up and I had to cancel them because Florida went through a hurricane. So it was like no power, luckily we were okay. My heart goes out to everyone who was affected. We were very lucky. But, I had to roll with those punches. I had to be able to reschedule things. And so for me, I think being able to do all the things is realizing that I can't do all the things all the time. Like I have
Mm.
to pick special times, where I'm focused on my son. Like right now, he's downstairs playing video games, but in about an hour, I'll sit down with him. He's got a test tomorrow and we'll
Mm.
go through, homework. Earlier today, my lunchtime is my husband works from home as well. So lunchtime, I'll go downstairs. We have lunch together. Or, there's a hockey game on right now. Our team is playing. So we might put that on the radio while we do other things.
Mm.
Um, or I focus on my work when I have something available for my paralegal position. Or if I have a client call or a podcast or something to do during the day, I block out time for things like that. So that's been the only way that I can function, is to block time out
Mm.
specifically for whatever it is that I want to do. I used to think that you could multitask, and I
Yeah.
realized that there's no such thing, because if
Mm.
you're not giving your full attention to one activity, you're half-assing all the other ones. So you're not
Mm.
fully present. And I think that's the biggest thing, is when you're doing something, you need to be fully present, whatever that something is.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people think that you have to give, like 2 hours of your time to focus on an activity. You really don't.
Right.
Our time spans are 25, 15, 20, 25 minutes that we can do.
Mm.
So just block out your time in those small increments and focus on one thing at a time. I don't know. What do you do?
Ah, well, when I'm on top of things, same thing, chunk out the time, right? And when it strays from that, things are just overwhelming. It's chaos. All these different things, and my
Hmm.
focus is split, and I don't get anywhere. I think, yeah, I'm going to work a bit on
Hmm.
this and this and this and this, and you got everything going on in your head. But yeah, I love the concept of chunking time, and I love that you mentioned it doesn't have to be several hours. Even something like
Hmm.
15 minutes can make a difference depending on what the task is. So I love that. And I'd like to know, did you always have this balance? Like what,
No,
like, no, okay, what was life like then
no,
without this? Yeah.
no. So I've always been a type A personality.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been the kind of person where if I'm not doing something, like I always have to be doing something.
Yeah.
And multiple things. So like I'm the kind of person, I still do it. I try not to, but I'm the kind of person that I am watching a movie,
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to a podcast or listening to a course I'm taking, and I'm taking notes. And at the same
Right.
time, I'm making sure, if my son comes and talks to me, I'm talking to him, I'm talking to my husband. I have like 10 different things going on. And if you were to ask me, so this is funny that you asked me this question, because yesterday, my husband, my son, and I were talking about something similar. And I asked my husband, I said, no, I asked my son, I said, is there ever a time where I'm talking to you and you zone out, you tune out?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, sometimes. And I know for me, there's times where my husband will talk to me and I'm doing something. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Peanuts characters,
Yeah, yeah.
Snoopy. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you know how when the adults talk, you hear that wah, wah,
Yeah.
wah. Okay, there are times where I physically hear my husband's talking and all I hear is wah, wah, wah. And I have to stop him and I have to be like, okay, babe, I did not hear anything you just said. This is the last thing I remember. Can
Mm-hmm.
you please repeat whatever it is that you were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was not focused on what you were saying and I did not hear anything that you said. And so now I'm a little bit more present
Mm.
in realizing that I can't do all the things. I
Yeah.
have to focus. And maybe it's with age. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's something that you realize as you get older, that your mind can only focus on one thing at a time to really hone in on it and really suck all of the goodness of whatever that moment is, or whatever that activity is, or whatever it is. So that's been something that I've really been focused on. But no, I was not like that. Maybe as early as 3-4 years ago, I wasn't like that at all.
Yeah. But how good does it feel, right? To have this balance. Such a good
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can really relate to, someone talking to you and you didn't catch a word of it because you're concentrating on
Yeah.
something else. And,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I feel rude to go, oh, can you repeat that? I didn't catch a word of it. But
Yeah.
actually, I think that's the right thing to do rather than pretend you heard it. And,
Yeah.
further down the track, it's going to backfire. They go, well, I told you that. And you said yes. Because sometimes I respond to go, yeah, uh-huh.
Yep. Yep. My
Just get,
husband is notorious for that. He is
yeah.
notorious for listening to me say something and he's not paying attention. It actually happened a couple weeks ago. I told him something that we were supposed to do for, I think it was for our son or something that we needed to get or something like that. Or no, it was a membership or something that I was buying, that I was opting into. And I told him, I said, this is how much it's going to be a month. It's an ongoing thing. I think it's going to really help me. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. And when the thing came out into our account, he's like, what is this? And I'm like, I told you like 3 weeks ago, we sat down, you were sitting there, you were eating dinner, I was over here. I gave you the entire spiel of what it was, the purpose of it, why I wanted to do it. And you said it was a great idea. And he's like, I don't remember that. And I'm like, but I mean, we're human. It happens.
Yeah.
We get like millions of, thoughts and ideas and synapses in our brain, like a mile a minute. There's no way we can process all of them.
Right.
So it's,
You
it's
need a bit
okay.
of empathy there. Yeah.
Yeah, we forgive him. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it can cause arguments, right? But
Yeah.
one thing that I find difficult, but that works, is sometimes set the boundary like, hey, I'm just working on this. Can you give me X amount of time and then I can be fully
Mm-hmm.
present for you? And
Yep.
that's helped me so much rather than just putting everything on hold because, hey, someone wants to talk to me. Is that something you do? Or?
I do actually. I like right now, my husband wanted to sit down and watch a movie. And I was
Mm,
like, well, I've got a podcast to do. I can come back and finish it with you.
yeah.
And my son was like, and earlier my son was like, he was at his grandparents. He was at my parents. And he's like, I'm going to need you to come pick me up. And I said, well, it's going to be now or it's going to be between 6:30 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Because once I sit down, I can't stop what I'm doing and go pick you up. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes he'll sit in here with me while I'm doing podcasts. He isn't now, but sometimes he'll sit in here with me and I'm like, okay, if you're going to be in here, you got to bring your headphones in
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be quiet. So yeah, definitely boundaries are a really important thing, not just when you're, content creating, podcasting or anything like that, but in general, and I think boundaries sometimes get a bad rap
Mm.
because people sometimes think that boundaries are for other people
Ooh.
to not do something. And boundaries aren't for other people, boundaries are for you. So the
Mm.
consequences you put with a boundary is based on what you're going to do. So if somebody, let's say like a friend of mine has this, this is how she explains boundaries. She says, if I tell you my boundary is that I don't answer telephone calls or client calls after 9 o'clock or emails or anything, like everything shuts down at 9 o'clock.
Mm.
And you send me a message at that time or after that time, the consequence is I'm not going to answer you.
Mm.
Now, if I break that boundary and I respond to you, then what I'm teaching you is that don't respect me, don't respect my boundaries
Mm.
because I'm not respecting my own boundaries. So if you look at boundaries in the sense of it's for you and not for them, I think it makes it a little bit easier to form those boundaries and stick to them. because you can't
Mm,
control other people's actions. You can only control your own. So the consequences you put aren't, if you do this, then you're going to do this. No,
right.
the boundaries you put in is, if you do this, I am going to do this.
Mm, mm. I like that take.
So,
Yeah.
hmm,
And
yeah,
I think a lot of people, part of the reason they're uncomfortable with boundaries is they see it as unkind or cruel or rude, even
right,
to set a
right.
boundary. But something I love, I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown. She does a lot of work
I
around.
am.
Yeah, right. And one of the things she says is clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I think
Absolutely.
that's so true.
Yep.
How could people possibly know what it is you want if you don't communicate that?
Yep. Communication is huge. And it's
Mm,
something that not just in business, but in life in general. I think so many people, in relationships, in friendships, you're constantly assuming that you know what the other person is thinking. Like, use my son again as an
mm,
example. So he's friends with this girl at school, and because she doesn't have a lot of friends, she thinks that he likes her because he's her friend. And I told him, it was like a week of me telling him, you need to be very clear with her that you just like her as a friend. You
mm,
just
mm,
want to be friends. You're not interested. And it's much easier. And I told him, I said, take it from me as someone who's been on the other end. It's much easier to know up front that someone is not
yes,
interested in you
yes.
than for me to, or for them to think that you like me. There's so many misunderstandings when things aren't clear.
Mm,
Everything gets muddy, things get weird, and not just in relationships, but in general.
mm,
Boundaries allow you to, like you said, to be clear. There's no doubt. There's no, well, maybe, what about this? Or no, when you're clear and you let people know from the get go,
mm,
there's no pretending. There's no, well, maybe they're going to go this way. No, they're always going to know, this is what Rosie said, and this
mm,
is how it's going to be.
mm.
So I'm a huge fan of clear and communication, and the more
Yes.
talking, the better.
Yeah,
The more talking, the better.
yeah, yeah.
I don't I don't like I don't like assuming. I've
Mm,
always heard, assume, when you assume, it makes an ass out of you and me.
so true. Yeah. It does, and it can have awful consequences. I'm not sure there's ever really such a thing as over communication.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Mm. Let's go back a couple of years. Because when
Sure.
we first met, you told me about a few life events that were pretty big,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So in
Yeah.
2016, one of your labels
Mhm.
then, you're a probation officer, right?
Yes.
Tell us about what happened.
So I had this client. She came in with pneumonia. I didn't know.
Mm, mm,
Um, and so for the next week or so, I was still going to work. I was having really high fevers. I was getting shivers. And around, like, this was around February, I kept going to the emergency room with, high fevers, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you.
mm,
You're fine. And I'm like, no, there is. I remember there's bits and pieces of this that I remember, and I don't remember all of it. So I
mm,
remember Valentine's Day, my husband came home and brought me chocolate covered strawberries, which I love.
mm,
And I remember telling him, I feel toxic.
mm,
I feel like I just felt funny.
mm,
And
mm,
so my mom came and picked me up. I believe it was the next day. She took me to the ER. I called my husband and I said, um, Mom brought me to the ER. I'm okay. They're checking me out. Our son was 3 or 4 at the time. I said, give him food. and I'll see you, if we're still here, you can come, and mom will take the baby.
Mm.
And he's like, okay, no problem. And it was only a few hours between our conversation. And the only reason I remember that was because he told me we had the conversation. I have no
Mm.
recollection of it whatsoever. By the time he got to the hospital, I had gone into respiratory arrest.
Wow.
They were intubating me. They were obviously admitting me. I had gotten walking pneumonia. I was septic,
Mm.
and all my organs were shutting down. Next thing I remember was waking up on February 26th. And I remember because that's my brother's birthday. So I
Mm.
remember him being in the hospital there. I don't know if I woke up before that, but that's the next thing I remember. And then going through, I was there for another few days. And then 3 months of physical therapy. I couldn't talk when I woke up.
Wow.
I couldn't write. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. And during this time, my son had just started hockey. And so while I was in the hospital, the way my family took care of everything was Monday through Thursday, my son stayed with my parents and my brother. My husband was in the hospital with me. And
Mm.
then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, my husband would stay with our son, take
Mm.
him to hockey, spend time with him, and either my mom or my dad came to the hospital and stayed with me in the hospital while I was, through the intubation and everything like that.
Mm.
Um, our families, our friends were great. Like they would come over and bring my husband food. My brother taught my son how to write his name. And my husband, every night, he would have my son on the phone. I couldn't answer, obviously, and my son was
Yeah.
too young to know. So he would put him on the phone to say goodnight every single night.
Mm.
And then, physical therapy, we stayed with my parents. And I remember talking to my dad because I didn't have any recollection of it. And I was like, there's pieces of the last few months that I don't remember. Why don't I remember?
Mm.
And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's okay." And I was like, "No, that really bothers me."
Mm.
And so when I was rehabbed enough, I went back to the hospital and I met with one of the nurses who had helped me through the whole thing. Her name was Geneva. She was amazing. And she actually sat down with me and she explained to me. She said, "We gave you a medication that was meant to remove the memory from the trauma because your body went through a trauma." So
Mm.
having heard that, it was like, okay, now there's an explanation
Right.
to why I don't remember, this time. She goes, it may come back to you in pieces. It may never come back, but this is why. That was probably one of the hardest times for me, for my family, for, our friends. It was like a really, like, I remember when the doctor came in after I woke up, he told my husband, he said if she had gone to bed and not come to the hospital, she would have died in her sleep.
Wow. Mm. How did that change things for you? Not on a memory
Yeah.
level or that sort of thing, but
Yeah. Yeah.
did it
Yeah.
change your perspective at all at life and how you went through things? Like, what was the consequence of that?
Absolutely. I'd have to say that it changed my perspective in the way that I don't feel like I have to be everything. I don't have to do
Mm.
everything. Some of it has actually come in the last few years.
Yeah.
The realization, and this is like where I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. I don't have to
Mm.
waste my time on things and on people that don't value me.
Mm.
Cut a lot of friendships off, a lot of relationships off, because I found that I'm the only one doing anything. Like I was the only one
Yes.
giving to the relationship. My husband and I were talking about this the other day. I was like, I am no longer subscribing to the let me do everything to please you.
Right.
I don't want to do it. That's it. Like no is a complete sentence. I'm
Mm.
done catering to people. I'm done. That doesn't mean I don't care. It
Right.
doesn't mean that if you need me, I'm not going to be there. But for right now, my circle is my husband, my son, and my family.
Yeah.
And if no one else is in that circle and no one else wants to be a part of that, okay.
It's all right. Yeah.
And that has been so freeing to not people please, to not like the freedom that has come with that realization that I don't
Mm.
have to put up with other people's BS and other people's issues, and not everybody has to like me, and not everybody has to be on board,
Right.
has been like huge weight lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah, that really resonates for me. And something I've come to realize is it's not about them, it's about you. Because who is it
Mm-hmm.
serving to maintain this relationship that is just a suck on your life?
Yeah.
For years, I've maintained relationships with people out of this sense of obligation. There's a history
Yep.
there. Or in my case, I lost both my parents and I have a lot of their friends in my life. And it's been a big journey to realize, well, just because they were friends with my parents doesn't mean I have to maintain that relationship.
Right.
And I found that really hard. But as you say, there is this sense of freedom. You actually know that's not serving me anymore. And
Right.
you just kind of you move through that. It has been life changing for me, and I think there is almost a sense of grieving. I find, I don't know if you
There
can
is,
relate to
and
that.
nobody
Yeah.
talks about that.
No.
Like no nobody talks about that. Like when you for yourself, when you make that decision to pull away from a relationship you've had, like this past year, the three of us broke away from relationships we've had for 7 years, you
Wow.
know, and to break away from those relationships, you do it slowly, but then you
Mm,
start to realize that once you stop communicating, no one's coming to communicate with you. So
right.
then you think to yourself, was I that important? Obviously, I
Mm,
wasn't if they're not reaching out to me. And then it kind of gets easier to let go of the relationship,
right.
because when it's not a two-way street, it tends to be a little bit easier to kind of let it go.
Right. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a thing that happens overnight. As you say, yeah, it,
Yeah,
it, it
yeah,
does tend to be gradual, which makes it easier.
yeah. And you're
Yeah.
still going to get triggered. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I still get, it's only been a year that I've let go of these relationships, and my son and my husband are farther along than I am, but for me it's still kind of, if I see them or I hear them, or you know like I had to cut everyone out of Facebook, cut everyone out of Instagram, just completely cut all of those ties. My
Mm,
husband still has ties, my son has ties with all the kids, but for me it was like I had to have a clean break. I couldn't hold on to that and still say, okay, I'm okay with the way the relationship is now. I had to just completely cut ties.
mm,
And it's not that way for everyone. I mean, is that how it worked for you, or did you have something different with it?
mm. Yeah, I find completely cut ties is the way I need to do it, because otherwise there's this grey area and my
Mhm.
boundaries get tested, and I know it's a weakness for me. I just want to please everybody. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
help. I can do that for you. So for me, yeah, that clean break is the best way for me to move forward, and I'm sure it's different for other people. Um and I'm sure I've mucked up many times, but my intention is never to hurt these people, right? It's just
Right.
to serve myself better. I A question I've asked myself a lot these days is, who is this serving? Who is this decision serving
Right.
by me catering to their every need and me just sort of being used? Or who is it serving for me to maintain a relationship that actually I'm not enjoying?
Right. And how much energy is it sucking out of you? Like how much time is it taking away from the people and the relationships that you do want to foster, that you do want to grow? You know, spending all that time with those, you know, energy vampires, it doesn't allow any time for you to do anything else but cater to them. And, you know, you're not helping anyone. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping the people who truly love and care about you,
Right.
because you're spending all your time and energy on them. And by the time someone that really does care, or you need that energy, need that fuel, it's no longer there and you have nowhere to go to get it. And if you don't cut those relationships out, it affects the real relationships you have, because you don't have time for, you know, those real relationships in your life anymore. And those people are going to end up, I mean, they'll always be there and they love and care for you. But when you don't have the time for the real relationships, it causes, you know, those are going to suffer.
It's a high price to pay.
Especially in hindsight, which is usually when you find those things out.
So true. Okay, let's keep traveling, right? That you had
All
another
right.
big life event, right?
I did.
2019 and
I did.
2020,
Yeah.
and I feel like these were
Yeah.
really pivotal. So
Yeah.
walk us through it, because 2019 again was pretty full on.
Again, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Not as bad as 2017, but still.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2019, I was working for a law firm. I ended up getting 2 kidney infections about 3 months apart that put me in the hospital. The law firm that I worked for actually fired me while I was hospitalized. They weren't that bad. My son was a little bit older. He could still talk to me. I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm fine. I'm awake. You can come see me. It's fine. He loved it because he got ice cream every time he came. When I got out, I had to figure out what to do. And this was right before COVID.
Right.
My brother was working for a construction company. My husband said, absolutely no, you're not working for another law firm. Haha, that's what I'm doing now. And so I went to work with him, with my brother, for doing, you know, scheduling, things like that for this construction company. That was about a 30-minute trip back and forth. Even with COVID, construction was considered an essential worker, you know, type. So I was not able to work from home. So I still had to drive back and forth. So I jumped into podcasting. I jumped into listening to podcasts. I'd always listened to them, true crime. I love true crime. But in 2019, I dove more into learning. I dove into VA podcasts, how to do VA work, how to do podcasting, how to edit, how to be a podcast producer. Then in 2022, jumped into, okay, let's really do this. You know, let's really turn this into a business. Let's turn this into something we can do. And in 2023, I jumped into the consulting strategist part, and specifically podcast launch, helping people launch their podcasts. And this year, I've come up with a framework where I focus not just on the tech and the editing and the producing side of it, but more the finding the balance, finding your authentic voice, empowering the podcasters, looking through that communication, that collaboration, mastering that mindset. I'm a firm believer that you can have the best tech in the world, but those troll thoughts are going to keep coming up whether you want to address them or not. And the less you address them, the stronger they're going to be. And if you don't address them, it's going to lead to burnout, to overwhelm, and you're going to quit doing something that I strongly believe, if you have a pull in your heart to do podcasting, it's because you know in your heart you have a message that somebody out there needs to hear. Otherwise, you know, there's billions of people in the world. Not everybody is called to have a podcast.
Right.
But you're the answer to someone's prayer. Someone out there needs to hear what you have to say the way you have to say it. And so that's where we are now.
I want to dive more into this because I love it. I have not come across anyone else who focuses on that side of podcasting.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people out there like Pat Flynn, who I love, and talks about the logistical side of starting a podcast, like equipment and editing and da-da-da-da-da, which is useful. I found it overwhelming when I started, like, how on earth do I do this? But this aspect of finding your voice and sharing a message, it's a huge part of it for me. Like I hear people talk about, I'm going to start a podcast because I want to earn money through it. Okay, great. I'd love to earn money through my podcast. I don't at the moment. It's not the reason I'm doing it. And I don't think it's enough of a reason to carry you through.
It's not.
Right.
It's not. It's really not. You have to have a deeper, stronger connection, because just the money aspect of it, when you are tired, when you are burnt out, when you don't know what to say, or you don't think you know what to say, when you don't want to record or you don't want to edit, the simple thought of more money is not going to get you past that hurdle.
No.
It's just not. You need to have a purpose and a goal beyond yourself. You have to have, and it's not that way for every podcaster.
Right.
I mean, but I guess for me, the people I've worked with and the people I've spoken to, they have a calling of what they want to accomplish with their podcast. And money is not the end goal. Sure. Is it going to be great? Is it a bonus? Absolutely. Are they going to turn it down? No. But it's not the reason why they get up and record and put out episodes weekly. It's not why they feel called to do this. And there's so many people out there who have a message, but really don't feel like they have a voice. What I hear a lot from people is, this has already been said. Someone else has already said this much better than I have.
Yeah.
And what I tell people is that the words, like, there's only a certain number of words in the language, in any given language. Pick your language. They're not creating new words. You know, I mean, I guess, I don't know, millennial kids are, but I don't know. But the magic is not in the words. The magic is in who is delivering them and how they are received.
Yes.
So I use this example a lot. You can take 5 people and have them all say good morning. It'll be 5 different ways. It's like when you're watching TV and you watch a lineup, like when you're watching a crime show and you watch a lineup and you have, 6 or 7 people and they have to read from a card a statement. Everybody's reading the same statement, but they all sound different. And it only resonates with the person, with the victim, if it's if they're the person who assaulted them or whatever is the one who says it. So like for everyone, we have our own lens of how we view the world. Our lives are completely different. Our experiences are completely different. And the way we speak and the messages we share are infused with all those experiences. And no 2 people have the same experience. Not even twins. You can have twins who grew up in the exact same household, the exact same experiences, and they will have completely different lens on how their lives were.
Yeah.
So that's where the magic is. That's where the authenticity comes. That's where your power is in realizing that you don't have to say anything different. You can say the same thing that these gurus say all the time. But your people, the person or the people who are supposed to hear the message from you, will be the ones who gravitate towards it, will be the ones who will be affected by what you say.
That's so validating to hear. And it made me think of sort of a real life example. So I have a sister. I'm always trying to help her, right? I need to stop because she doesn't want the help. But, I'll say these things like, oh, you should do this, or I'll try to pass on wisdom and advice. And, it goes in one ear and out the other. And then she'll come to me months, years sometimes later and go, oh, she's had this big revelation. And in my head, I'm going, I've been telling you that for how long?
Yep.
But she's just heard it from someone else, and something about that made it click for her. I think that's a classic example of it, because you're so right. It's not about the words that you're saying. I mean, it has a role to play, but it's so much more about who it's coming from, how they say it, what their experience or the lens they see the world through is, because it develops connection, right?
Yep. And sometimes too, you could give someone a message and they're not ready to receive it. They like, people have to be ready to receive that message. And if they're not ready, like, I'm into human design. I'm a projector. And one of the things I've learned in the past couple of years by diving into my human design is that I may have the answer. I may have what people need to hear, but if they're not ready, it doesn't matter. My message isn't going to get to them. They're not going to listen because they're not ready to receive whatever insight I have. And so I've had to really step back and wait for someone to ask me for my opinion or ask me for insight before I give it. Because if they're not ready, like, there's nothing I can do. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
Right. That's really important. It's a big lesson I've learned. Is people, like, sharing your advice is sometimes, it's unwanted, it's unwarranted, it's not helpful.
Right.
And something that helped me understand this is, for example, I might be venting, I'm angry about something. I'll be, actually, this is a classic example. When Mum was alive, I'd come to her and I'd vent as an angry teenager or whatever. And she'd try to problem solve it for me. It's coming from a place of love and care. And it would just make me angrier. And on reflection, it's like, I just wanted her to listen. I wasn't ready for the advice. So now, when a friend comes to me and they've got a problem or a frustration or whatever it is, I go, hey, are you wanting someone to just listen right now? Or would you like some advice? And initially I felt really uncomfortable asking that because it felt so unnatural. Like, it jolts the conversation, you interrupt it. But it's been a game changer because the person will tell me, hey, I just want someone to listen right now. I'm like, right, I got you. If they're angry at someone, I'll be like, yeah, that bitch or whatever, I'm there for them and whatever it needs to be. And I think it's really improved my relationships and helped me, I guess, be there better for my friends. It's a better relationship and forms better connections.
Yeah, I do that with my husband. Like, at first, when I would want to vent, he'd always try to fix it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't need you to fix it. And sometimes we get into arguments because he's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I don't have anybody else. Like, I don't have a sounding board anywhere else. I don't have any close girlfriends that I can, like, bounce things off of. You're all I have. So sometimes I just need to vent and I just need you to sit there. You don't even need to listen. Just every once in a while, every few words, go,
Yeah.
Shake your head, pretend like you don't even need to listen to me.
That's true. Yeah.
I just need to get it out.
Yeah.
And now my son, when he sees that I'm kind of, like, he'll come to me and he'll be like, Mommy, do you need to talk? And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll be fine. Mommy, it's okay. I'm here. You can talk.
Wow.
What do you need? And we do the same thing with him. We're like, what do you need? Like he's got a therapist that he talks to every once in a while. And we're like, do we need to call the therapist? Do you need time to talk? Do you need to talk to someone? And he's got a few people around him that we tell him, if you can't talk to us, he knows who he can go to. He knows who he can trust. And he'll talk to, he's got a few teenagers that are older than him. He's got a couple of coaches, so he knows who to go to depending on what the issue is. But like the other day, he texted me and he goes, Mommy, when can I date? And I was like, 15, when you can drive and you can take yourself places? So what's the point of dating if you can't, you know? And I thanked him. I told him, I was like, thank you for, trusting me to ask me that question.
Right.
And so I think this goes back to communication. I think so many people forget how important communication is. In whatever stage of life you are, in whatever relationship you are, you know, I love that you said that when you first started asking people, what do you need?
Mm.
It felt a little bit uncomfortable.
Mm.
When I think about that, I think that should be a norm. It shouldn't feel uncomfortable
Right,
for you to
right, right.
ask someone, what do you need?
Mm.
But when we grew up thinking about listening and about hearing other people, 9 times out of 10, we're not listening. We hear, but we're hearing to respond. We're not
Right.
listening. We're not listening to really see what this person is telling us or what like, and so you asking, what do you need, validates the emotions and the feelings of
Mm.
the other person. And it
Mm.
shows them, I'm really listening. I really want to know, how can I help you? What do you need?
Yeah, it does start off uncomfortable, but I love it. And when someone asks me that, I'm like, oh, you're right. It feels really validating. And hey, they're
You feel
really,
seen. You feel seen.
yes, you do feel seen. Absolutely. I want to jump back to this podcasting thing because something I'm so passionate about is finding your voice. So I'd love to hear your take. How does podcasting help people find their voice? What are your thoughts?
So I think when you start podcasting, and I think a lot of people, when they start, it's funny, there's a lot of introverts in
Yeah.
podcasting because it's a medium where, I mean, now more people are getting into video, but it used to be just an audio format.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
No one saw you, it was just your voice. The more you talk into the podcast, the more comfortable you get with talking.
Mm.
And the more you are yourself, the more you are authentically you, and you speak from a place of, from a heart centered place, from, your experiences, your thoughts, the easier it gets.
Mm.
It's a medium where it's so intimate.
Yes.
You know, someone is inviting you into their ears, into their mind, into, they're listening to you by choice.
Mm.
They're choosing to do that. And so that communication becomes that much stronger because now they're choosing what they listen to, who they're listening to, and they're choosing you. I think nowadays, since COVID, I'd say, but I call it, I'm going to curse, people's shit-o-meter is so high.
Yeah.
Like, people are no longer trying to hide behind the fake, the masks, the lie. People want truth. They want vulnerability. They want to see themselves in other people. We want to see not just our shortcomings, but our successes, our obstacles, our struggles. The fact that we are more alike than we are divided.
Mm.
And I think that's what podcasting brings in. Podcasting allows us to see that we are far more connected than we are separate. There's
Mm.
far more in common that you have with people all over the world than we have differences. We have differences, and our differences are beautiful.
Yeah.
But our human struggle, our struggles as human beings are the same no matter where you're coming from. They just manifest in different ways.
Ooh, yeah.
But the struggles are the same. And when podcasting allows you to bring up your struggles, to bring up how you overcame them, and it shows someone else who might be going through the same thing that you've already gone through, that now they did it, I can do it too.
Yeah. And as an introvert, I feel so connected with the hosts of the podcasts I listen to.
Yeah.
I feel like I know them intimately. They have no
Yeah.
idea who I am, but I feel so connected. And that's not necessarily something I get in real life, because I find it so hard to go out and talk to people and start conversations, which some people find bizarre, because on a podcast I'm talking to people.
Yeah. It's
But
different though. It's
it
different. Like
is. Yeah.
I'm an introverted extrovert.
Right.
Like I always thought I was an extrovert.
Mm-hmm,
And then
mm-hmm.
I learned about it and I'm like, no, I don't get energy from being the center of attention and talking to a lot of
Yeah.
people. That drains me. But you put me in a one-on-one real conversation, not shop talk, not, surface conversations. You
Mm.
put me in a really good conversation and that fuels me. That fills me up.
Maybe I'm an introverted extrovert too. That sounds like
Yeah,
me.
like
Yeah.
I love real conversations. I don't
Mm.
like small talk. I'm
No.
not a fan of small talk. I, that's not for me. I love real, honest, vulnerable conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Something where we both come out of the conversation either better than we were going in, or feeling better about ourselves, or having a new point of view that we didn't think about before. Those are the type of conversations I enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to help my clients realize, is that when you go into a conversation, you should always try to leave the other person feeling better or having learned something new than when they came into the conversation.
Something I want to touch on, which I haven't seen anyone else talk about, and I'd like your take on this,
Mm-hmm.
is sometimes I find it really lonely as a podcaster, because I don't have that relationship with my listeners.
Yeah.
So whereas as a listener of podcasts, I feel so connected. I don't feel lonely. And as a host, I feel very connected with my guests, but my listeners, it's just this mystery. So what would your advice be around that?
So with that, I would say try doing some Q&As, like asking
Mm.
after an episode, have your audience ask you questions. You may not get traction right away, but you may get a
Mm-hmm.
question or two, and then create episodes answering those questions and let the audience know, hey, this question was brought in by this listener. If they give you permission to use their name, or,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you can just say one of my listeners. Engage them, have them give you what topic ideas that they want to hear.
Mm.
Involve them in the process of your creation so that they feel like they're a part of the show.
Mm.
Because you think they may not be engaging with you, but they're listening every week.
Mm.
So a friend of mine calls it lurkers. They're
Yes.
lurking. They're lurking. They're there. They're waiting for you to put something else out. I'm terrible at this. I don't engage with half the podcasts I listen to.
Mm.
Maybe one or two, but overall, I don't send messages. I
Mm. Mm.
don't
Mm.
do likes. I don't do, and it's not because I don't want to. It's not because the podcast affected me or it did not affect me.
Right.
I don't know why. I've just never been very good at reviews and stuff. But so don't think that people aren't listening. They're listening.
Mm.
They're just not engaging.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think podcasting is such a different medium or platform to, say, for example, YouTube, where it's very normal to like and
Yeah,
subscribe and comment.
right. And to
But
tell people that all the time.
right. So I think that's something maybe I could bring up more in the episodes. And I've also
Yeah,
noticed on Spotify, you can now comment on
I
episodes.
did see that. I
And
did see that.
which is so cool. I'm like, oh, I like this, because I had a random comment pop up. I went, oh, someone listened to this. Like, of course, I
Yeah.
see the stats that people are listening, but to actually have that tangible feedback feels really good.
Yeah. And just think, you feel connected to other podcast hosts. So just imagine your listeners feel that way about you. So just reframe it.
Yeah, that's a powerful reframe. That's something I'm going to do. To finish up this episode, this is something I like to ask all my guests. And you even mentioned this earlier in the episode. So I'd love to know, Aeoliana, what does freedom mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Would have to say freedom to me is just a weight lifted. Just having the ability to do life on my own terms, have relationships in my own terms, spend time with the people doing the things that I enjoy, and not having to carry other people's expectations of who I should be, what I should do, how I should act, and just being authentically, genuinely who I am.
I'm absorbing that. And you'd think that asking the same question on every episode would get boring. Honestly, the answers are all different. And
Yeah.
I love it. Something that goes through my head, I'm like, would be really cool to do an episode where I collate my guests' take on what freedom is, because it's fascinating to me. And, even your reaction when I asked the question, you're like, oh, because it's such a big question, right? Like, whoa, what is freedom to me? It's going to look different.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that, because I have a friend of mine who has a podcast, and her podcast is called Happiness Happens. And she's been doing it, I think, for 4 years now. And she always asks people, what does happiness mean to them? She said she's never gotten the same answer twice.
Yeah. And she's been doing it 4 years.
Yep.
Amazing stuff.
So it's such a simple word. Freedom is such a simple word, but again, like we were talking before, depending on who you are, what your life experiences are, what your lens is of life, it can take on so many meanings.
Yeah.
So many meanings.
Yeah. Something I was really worried about when I started asking the question, I thought, oh, some of these answers might be boring. Like, what if they just say, oh, financial freedom? What if everybody says financial freedom? But I don't think any one of my guests has ever mentioned financial freedom, which I find like, oh, wow. It was unexpected to me. I don't know why, but I guess in media and society, money and getting the $1 million figure or whatever, it just is prioritized so much. But actually, when I talk to people, it's not at the forefront.
Yeah, no, because you can have the money and still be the most miserable person in the world. Money just pays the bills, which is great. But, if you feel lonely, no amount of money is going to change that, because even if you have a lot of money, and a lot of these, celebrities will tell you that, like, you can have all the money in the world. You can be at the center of attention of parties and things like that and feel like the loneliest person in the room.
Yeah.
Money doesn't buy you true connection. It buys surface connection, but it doesn't buy true connection. You can't buy that. There's no price to true connection, true communication, true collaboration. There's no price tag for that. You can't pay for that.
No.
That's something that is built genuinely through being vulnerable, being authentic, having those boundaries, sharing your truth. That's the only place where that genuine connection can come from.
Yeah. And I think money can open doors, but you're right. It's not a required piece to form that connection. We all crave connection and belonging. And money isn't required to do that. And money isn't a sign of how successful you are as a person or how
Right.
worthy you are or how capable you are.
I think actually it actually enhances those insecurities.
Oh, yeah.
The more money, the more insecure you feel because you have to live up to a certain ideal when you have the money. And yeah,
Mm,
it might buy you into, into bigger spaces and bigger audiences, but then you still feel unworthy to be there. Like, did I
yeah,
really
yeah.
earn being here? Do I really belong here? These people aren't like me. Do I really belong in this space? And so I
Mm,
think the more money you have, the more it enhances our insecurities.
the more money we have, the more it enhances our insecurities. Whew. Yeah. Whew, that's a powerful one. Oh,
We'll
and
come back to that another
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'd be here far too long.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
And on that truth bomb, I just want to say thank you so much, Aeoliana, for this amazing conversation and being so generous with your time.
Thank you, Rosie. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you inviting me and letting me have this space to talk with you today.
Of course. Thank you